distinct pleasure of introducing our guest speaker, Attorney Marlon Jones. Now, Ms. Jones currently serves as the Director of Equal Opportunity and Inclusion and Title IX Coordinator for the University of North Florida. She investigates claims of discrimination based on Title VII, specifically those claims based on gender, and she provides university-wide training in the areas of diversity and inclusion, unconscious bias, the First Amendment, and Title IX. Ms. Jones oversees the University Title IX Committee and serves on the Intercollegiate Athletics Committee, Alcohol and Other Drugs Committee, the Advanced Team for the College of Construction, Engineering, and Computing, and participated in the group that developed the university's strategic plan for inclusive excellence. Ms. Jones previously worked as an NCAA Division I compliance officer for over 15 years at the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, the University of South Carolina, Florida A&M University, and North Carolina Central University, where she certified student athletes for competition and providing compliance education for faculty, staff, students, parents, boosters, and recruits. For over 8.5 years, she ran the Eligibility Coach Consulting Service, where she served as a personal coach for parents, high school guidance counselors, and youth coaches to provide an understanding of the NCAA and NAIA rules involved in acquiring intercollegiate athletic scholarships. Her other sports administration employers include NCAA, the Orange Bowl Committee, and the Atlanta Committee for the Olympic Games. She has taught sports law, diversity in sports, human resource management for parks, recreation, and sports, management for sports, and recreation and personal management courses at Florida A&M University, North Carolina Central University, the University of Valley Forge, Florida International University, and the University of North Florida. She is a member of the Jacksonville alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from the University of North Carolina, Masters of Science in Mass Communications and Business Administration from Virginia Commonwealth University, and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Miami School of Law. She is the mother of a high school girl basketball player who's actually here today. And she attends Douglas Anderson School of the Arts. And Ms. Jones also has her podcast, View from the Big Chair, Examining the Cost to be the Boss. It actually debuted last week on February 2nd on the Just Elridge Media Network. And she's going to have new episodes drop each Friday. And I think she said they're available on Spotify, Amazon, and Google, so it's really exciting. So we thank you so much for speaking today.
Thank you. I'm very technology challenged, so I hope this is going to work. I leave all the technology up to the teenager in the house. And I've worked in athletics and particularly worked with Title IX for a lot of years. So when I was asked to speak, it wasn't hard to pull together some information. I want to go back to where I started with my sport administration journey. I grew up on Tobacco Road, as we call it, in Atlantic Coast Conference country, back when there were only 8 schools in the conference. So I knew I wanted to go to one of them, and I wanted to try and work in sports somehow. But there wasn't really an opportunity for me to be an athlete because my high school predates NCAA even having championships for women. I was a sophomore in college before the NCAA started having championships for women's sports. They were all done by the AIAW before that. So I played tennis for a couple of weeks, and then I went back to cheerleading because as a cheerleader, I got into football games and the basketball games free, and I had a reserved seat. So we fast forward 40-some years, and now my daughter is able to go to high school and consider going to college on a scholarship that would pay her a scholarship and room, board, and books to participate in athletics. And that's all because of Title IX. So Title IX is misunderstood a lot. Athletics and sexual assault are the areas that we're going to talk about today. And those are the ones that get the most publicity. But a Title IX coordinator, as I am for a university, is responsible for all of the areas of the university. I'm sorry, I hit myself in the face and there's a big scratch right across where I see, so I'm just going to take them off. We are responsible for making sure that everything from scholarships, financial aid, housing are the same for both genders. We also have to work with the athletic departments to make sure that academic advisors aren't steering women towards certain majors and away from other majors. We have to make sure that programs and activities, including opportunities to do research with faculty members, to go on study abroad trips, are evenly distributed amongst the genders. So when we look at athletics, there's a 3-part test to decide if a university is in compliance with Title IX. The penalty for non-compliance is the federal government removing all of the federal financial aid that a university receives. So that includes a lot of our grants that our professors use to create knowledge and do their research. And any school that receives federal Pell Grants receives federal funds. And a lot of the state grants are subsidized by federal money. So there's a lot at stake for not meeting the parameters of the legislation. So starting with prong 1, universities are asked, this came from the Cohen v. Brown case centuries ago. We're asked to look at the percentage of female students at the university compared to male students at the university. Then the participation opportunities that you provide for female student athletes should be at a similar percentage as those for male student athletes. So any university that sponsors football is already not able to meet this prong, because your Division I teams are going to have between 85 to 100 scholarships on their football team alone, and most of them do not have an equivalent women's sport. A lot of them try to get it through rowing and track and field by having 50 and 60 members on those teams. But if you're number 49 or number 50 on the track team, is it really an opportunity for you to participate? Or is the university just using a game with numbers and padding it to try and make up for that football? So most schools are not going to meet prong 1. If you don't meet prong 1, we move to prong 2. And in prong 2, you must show that you have continually added women's opportunities. That's generally by adding women's sports teams. In the state of Florida, bowling is a high school championship sport. So some of the universities here have added bowling teams. But a bowling team is only going to get you about 8 participation opportunities. So you're still not going to be able to balance out that football. And most of the schools in the past few years have been cutting their budgets, and therefore they have not really been adding women's sports. So the majority of the schools are also going to fail on prong 2. So most of the schools try to prove that they meet the legislation through prong 3. And the way they do that is by surveying incoming freshmen and going through the dormitories and surveying women who live on campus and asking them, are there any sports that we don't offer that you think we should be offered that you might be interested in? When it's presented in that way, the answer is generally no, because they don't understand what they're actually asking. And the way the schools get in trouble is through club sports and intramural sports, which have teams for sports that the university does not offer. So if we're at Disney University and Disney has intramural sports for field hockey, but there is no competitive field hockey team in the athletic program, the fact that there are women on campus who are playing field hockey shows they have an interest in it. The fact that they're playing shows they have the ability, the basic knowledge to play the game. It doesn't say that their ability level has to be at a high championship professional level. The legislation says they have to have an interest in and an ability to compete in the sport. So this is what the legislation actually says. And it specifically notes educational programs and activities. So that gets back to my first point. It's not just athletic activities. So it would be theater, it would be music. We at UNF have a school of nursing. Our School of Nursing is with our College of Health Administration. It is about 75% female. So that college needs to recruit male students and male professors so that they are trying to make up for their underrepresented sex. As opposed to our college where we have engineering, which has very few female students. They have to recruit female professors and female students into their college. So it's very specific, not just to the university, but to the individual colleges that make up the university. And that's where my office tries to help them make proactive recruitment plans for students and faculty. Last spring, during the NCAA basketball championship, there was a male student athlete who, these students live on social media all day. They want the world to see everything that they're doing. So this person went on first and showed the weight room that was provided for the men's basketball players to use while they were at the championships, because they were all quarantined. Then the person decided they wanted to show the food. Look at what we're eating. Look at what the NCAA is providing for us. Then they thought they needed to share their gifts, their swag bag. We got this, this, and this. Look at how wonderful it is. Look at how great we're being treated. So the female student athletes saw the post. They didn't have a weight room. They had a few pieces of weight equipment that was placed into a room. Their food was very different. And the gifts were not the same. So some of the women's coaches spoke out, said, we are both here representing our universities in an NCAA championship event. The only difference is the gender of the athletes. Why is there a difference in the equipment, the food, and the gifts from the national association that sponsors the sport? And then the broadcasters brought it to the attention that only the men's championship was able to use the phrase road to the Final Four. The women were going to a Final Four. This is a marketing thing that you use to create billions with a B dollars. Why are the female student athletes who put in the same amount of practice, film study, weightlifting, missing class, not able to do the same? So this year, the NCAA is on notice and they are preparing for the championship. We'll see how it goes. Within Title IX for athletics, this is called our laundry list. And these are the things that are supposed to be equitable. Now, we use the word equitable a lot in athletics because we know everything can't be equal. Sometimes you have to treat people differently in order for them to have a similar experience. So we're going to run through just some of the things, and I ask you to look at it from the lens of you are taking your niece or your church member or your granddaughter to a university because they're thinking about participating in athletics there. These are the things that they need to think about that go on when we don't have women at the table asking the questions. So we start with equipment and uniforms. Sounds simple. However, there are some schools that have felt the need to provide newer equipment for men's basketball, older equipment for softball as opposed to baseball. In basketball, they're gonna give everybody basketball. But if the men's team has the automatic rebounder, where the women's team doesn't, and they're having to chase down balls, that's giving them less time to be able to actually practice their shots, because they're running around chasing balls. That's not equitable. With uniforms, there were times when men's teams got new uniforms every year, and women's teams would get them every 3 years. So you're on this visit, you want to ask the young women on the team, when's the last time you got new uniforms? What type of equipment is provided for you? How often is it provided? How often is it updated? Not just the competition uniforms, but we know young people live in hoodies. Do they have practice uniforms? Do they have traveling sweatpants, sweatsuits? Do they have gear to wear around campus? If the men's team has it, the women's team shouldn't have to go to the bookstore. Transportation. The majority of our schools, NAIA, NCAA Divisions 2, 3, and your lower resource Division 1 schools are going to travel by bus. Our women's swim team is getting ready to go to the swim championships next week. It's in Lynchburg, Virginia, and they're taking a bus for 10 hours to get there. That's part of college athletics, except for when you have football teams who get charter flights, like on the right. The 3 years I spent working in the Southeast Conference showed me that everybody else is pretending to be in the college athletic game. There is nothing like the money that is spent on football in the Southeast Conference anywhere. We were in Columbia, South Carolina, and I had to accompany our football coaches to a training session at the SEC office in Birmingham, straight down Highway 20. And we met our pilot at the executive airstrip so that they could fly us there. And he waited for us until the meetings were over to fly us back, because we wanted to make sure that those coaches were gone for the least amount of time possible so that they could be back for practice. That's a lot of money. Almost enough money to fund some female sports teams. So when Title IX comes into play is that if any of your men's teams have a charter flight, there has to be a female team that year that also has a charter flight. It may be softball, it may be volleyball, it may be golf, but you have to provide something equitable on the women's side. So you need to ask when you're visiting, how do you travel to the games? Do any of the teams fly? If so, which ones are they? How often do they fly? Do they fly commercial? Do they fly charter? How do they get to the championships? All of those things. Tutoring. My daughter and I were having this conversation earlier. She's about at the point where she's played out of basketball, and she thinks that I want her to just play in college to play. I don't want her to be in the WNBA, but I worked in college athletics for 25 years, and I see all of the things that are provided for student athletes that aren't provided for other students. Things I didn't have access to. Tutors for whatever the class is. Athletic academic advisors who help you plan out your schedule, who meet with your professors to make sure you can take a test either early or late, who register you for your classes before anybody else on campus so that you get the schedule you want, because you've got to make sure that your classes don't interfere with practice. Don't think it's the other way around. Your classes can't interfere with practice, not practice interfering with your classes. We left fun and games at the YMCA a long time ago. This is a business. This is a big business. But again, it must be equitable. We can't provide that for football and men's basketball and baseball because they bring in money, and not provide it for women's tennis and softball and women's swimming and diving and golf. Ironically, those women's teams generally have the higher GPAs. I was talking with a swimmer yesterday who had an issue, and when I asked her, had anything impacted her academically, and she said, well, no, I was already a week ahead because I wanted to make sure that before we went to the championships, I had everything done. Most of our male student athletes aren't quite there. Coaching. Do you have comparable coaching? That is in the number of coaches. If the head women's basketball coach only has 2 full-time assistants, but the men's head basketball coach has 4 full-time assistants, that means that the head women's coach is going to have to do a lot more administrative tasks, which takes her, or unfortunately mostly him, away from spending time with the team and doing the actual coaching. Because somebody has to do all the travel arrangements. Somebody is checking on class to make sure that the student athletes are going to class, that they're going to study hall. Somebody is making arrangements with the cafeteria to get the meals in advance to take on that bus trip. And if you don't have enough assistant coaches, the head coach has to fill some of that role. Quality of coaches. Dawn Staley was a new head coach. She wasn't new to basketball when she came to South Carolina, but she was new to being a head coach. She's an Olympian coach, she's an Olympian player. And at this point, she's arguably a higher rated coach than the men's coach, Frank Martin, when he came there from Kansas State. Our coach, Vivian Stringer, has 1,000 wins. We all stand in athletics on her shoulders for what she's been doing for so many years. But you need to know how many coaches, who they are, how long their contract is. Did you give the men's coach a 5-year contract and the women's coach only a 2-year contract? Why? They're coaching the same thing. They both have to go out into the community and sell tickets. Locker rooms. Make sure you don't just have people tell you about the locker room, but that you actually go and see the locker room. Is there enough room for the entire team to be in there at one time? Sometimes the outside area is huge like this, but then there'll only be 2 shower stalls. Are you gonna have to shower in your dorm room before and after competition? Are you gonna have to shower and then go back to the dorm to change your clothes? When is the last time it was refurbished? Does it have carpet? Does it have tile? What's in the men's? When's the last time the men's was updated? Practice facilities and competition facilities. When you don't have a separate practice facility, the competition facility becomes where you practice. If the competition facility is where you practice, that means women's basketball, men's basketball, and volleyball are all using the same facility to practice. You have probably a 3-hour-ish time blocked out for practice each day. If you've got that many teams that have to practice, who gets the middle of the day 2 to 5 slot that everybody wants? And who has to come at 6 a.m. and who has to be there at 5 p.m. And it can't be the women's team always having the 6 a.m. time slot. So how is the university managing that piece? And the turnover. Who's turning the gym over from being a basketball gym to being a volleyball gym? And how much time is that gonna take? That has to also be factored in. Athletic training and sports medicine. Schools are getting better because there have been lawsuits. There were times I worked at a university where we had 2 full-time athletic trainers, and we sponsored the sport of football, and we had a couple of graduate assistants. Unfortunately, during football season is also volleyball season. You've got 100 guys on the field, all the athletic trainers were on the field. We were in the gym at volleyball practice. A young woman fell very hard on her arm. One of the players had to leave practice to go down to the field to find an athletic trainer to bring them back up to tend to her, and she had a broken arm. You need to know how many athletic trainers there are. Is there a dedicated athletic trainer for your specific team? Is there an athletic trainer that travels with the team? You don't want to be at an away event and have to rely on the athletic trainer there who's trying to tend to all their athletes, also managing injuries for your athletes as well. Housing. This is where you spend the majority of your time when you're not in the gym. It's where you live. Don't let them just drive you by and see a pretty building. You need to see the inside of a room. What is the space where you're actually gonna live look like? How many people are gonna live in that space? Where is the bathroom? Is it down the hall? Is it adjacent? How many people are sharing it? There are other common areas. Is there a kitchen? You can't cook in your room. Is there a kitchen facility in the building? Is there a lounge? Is there a study room? If there's a study room, does it have a printer? Are you able to print assignments that must be turned in? Does it have Wi-Fi if you must submit those assignments online? Those are all things that have to be provided for both genders. Recruiting. A lot of students said, but I'm already here. They already recruited me, I already signed. Why do I care about the recruiting budget that my coach has? Well, it's because you care about the quality of players who are going to come behind you and become your teammates. And if the men's basketball recruiting budget is double the women's, then your coach is not going to be able to attend as many travel tournaments or go to as many competitions to see potential players, to make contact with potential players, to bring in people behind you who are going to be able to support you on the track or on the field or on the court. So you need to understand what the recruiting budgets are as well. The other part of Title IX that gets a lot of publicity comes from Alyssa Milano doing a tweet saying if any woman has been sexually harassed or assaulted in her job or school, please respond with the hashtag #MeToo. In less than 24 hours, there were over 85 countries that had over 1,000 people each respond to that tweet. It is still a worldwide problem of women being abused and attacked. So we provide education, training, and support for people who have experienced any type of sexual misconduct. The most common kind is quid pro quo, this for that. I'm gonna give you some shrimp, I'm gonna give you some calamari, you give me some shrimp. If the shrimp takes the form of any type of sexual favor, sexual act, it is sexual misconduct, especially if the person has any type of supervisory level over the student or the employee. Where we run into a lot of issues is when we have graduate assistants who last year were peers with these student athletes, and now they're in a supervisory position where they have the ability to get information to the coach to decide who plays and how much time they play, to decide who travels and who doesn't travel, to decide who gets which tutors. So we have to educate our young people so that they understand what their rights are, so that they know when to ask for help. Because a lot of times I will do a training and then a young woman will come up to me afterwards and say, you know, that happened to me a couple of years ago. I didn't know that was considered sexual misconduct. When I was growing up, we were told you just deal with it. You figure it out, you work it out. We're not there. These students need to know that there's a Title IX coordinator on every campus and that they need to be able to reach out to that office for help. Sexual misconduct is a big umbrella, and unfortunately we have a lot of dating violence that's taking place. A lot of stalking and sexual exploitation has increased since we went remote to COVID. People weren't face to face, they weren't able to harass each other in person. They took to social media. It's new to me, but I found out it's very old. There's a forum called Yik Yak, which is completely anonymous. It disappeared and it's recently come back. And there are a lot of claims on there about students being sexually assaulted at different colleges and universities. So we're all having to monitor that so that we can show the federal government that we've tried to find out some information, but we don't know if the information there is about a party that happened last week or last year. So we don't even know if the people who were the potential perpetrators are even still a member of our community. But we have to show that we're doing education and outreach to keep them safe. In the United States, that's a minute and 13 seconds. Every minute and 13 seconds, someone in this country is sexually assaulted. We, unfortunately, will never go out of business on our campuses because our campuses just reflect what's happening in our society. And 1 of 5 women are targeted. And we say targeted because there are certain communities, unfortunately the Greek community, I'm a member of a Greek letter organization, but there are a lot of fraternities that still have parties with the sole intent of getting women drunk so that they can have sex with them. We have to do all that we can to eliminate sexual assault. It starts with education and training and then making sure all of our students understand what their rights are. As an educational institution, one of the things we have to do is promote and teach about healthy relationships. If you come to my campus at 18 years old and you've never seen a healthy relationship, your mother was abused, your neighbors were abused, the people at your church were abused, then you listen to radio, you watch TV, you play video games where violence is glorified, particularly violence against women, where women are called all kinds of things in songs that are inappropriate. If that's all you ingest for 18 years, that becomes your normal. And then you come on our campus and we say, oh, we're now gonna punish you for being who you are. Because you don't know that what you've experienced is not acceptable. So we have to find a way to include education for the males, and I say males because 95 to 99% of the sexual assaults are perpetrated by a male person. Not always on another female, sometimes on other males. One of the biggest problems we have in reaching some of the young women on our campuses is they feel that if someone hasn't hit them, that they haven't been abused. They don't understand the emotional scars that come with language, that come with neglect, that come with shaming. Those are also forms of abuse. That too is a part of dating violence. Consent. We have so many conversations every year about consent, and they mostly revolve around drugs and alcohol. Because just as you can't legally enter into a contract if you're under influence of drugs and alcohol, you can't consent to sex. And I particularly try to speak with our male student athletes, because a lot of times people know them that they don't know. And there are young people on campus who just want to be included so badly that they will drink even though they don't want to. They will take drugs because they were given to them. And they will say yes to sex with different people because they think it's expected and required. But if you're under the influence of drugs and alcohol, I don't care if the person says yes. They can then come back to my office and say you raped them, and I have to send you through a system as if you are a rapist, because the law says you are. I can say I want to have sex with you on Sunday, and on Wednesday I don't want to, and you can't make me. And because I say I want to have sex with you doesn't mean I want to have sex with your roommate, and you can't make me do that either. But we get so many of our women in the Greek system who they want to come and get the services, but they don't want to proceed with a formal investigation because they don't want their sorority sisters to be mad at them when their sorority's not invited to the parties. And they certainly don't want to not be invited to the Georgia-Florida tailgate. I've heard that every year that I've been here. If I tell you who did it, I can't go to the Georgia-Florida tailgate. That means we are all failing these young women if they think it's more important for them to be at a tailgate than it is to stand up for their rights and to protect themselves. Drunk never means yes. Never, ever. And they still don't understand that. We have a lot of student athletes who are members of the LGBTQ community. More of them are open now than they were when I was in school, where we just pretended it didn't exist. I grew up in the South, so I grew up in the Bible Belt. And a lot of times we have coaches that feel you must believe as they believe. And so if they believe that it's a sin for you to be gay, sometimes they will try to do things like take away playing time, or they will try to not renew your scholarship at the end of the year. We have coaches who just don't want to deal with the fact that they have team members who are dating each other. I had one call me the other day. He said, "What am I supposed to do?" "You're supposed to do nothing." Would it be any different if that student was dating a baseball player or dating a golfer? They're dating one of their teammates, and you think they're dating. You're not even sure that they're dating one of their teammates. It's none of your business. Doesn't have anything to do with their ability to play the game that we gave them a scholarship to play. And so we need to make sure that these young women know that their scholarship can't be taken away from them just because of their sexual identity or their gender orientation. Unfortunately, our students with disabilities, our employees with disabilities, and members of the LGBTQ community have a higher rate of sexual assault than any other persons. People take advantage of them, and as a result, they don't feel that the university is looking out for them. One of the constant, I've had to deal with in my position is people telling me, someone brought a claim against me and you didn't support me. And my answer is, you're correct. But I also don't support the complainant. I am charged with doing an impartial, fair investigation and determining what evidence there is to prove that university regulations were violated. That does not mean you may not have been attacked. That doesn't mean that I don't believe that something happened. But I have to make sure that I treat the complainant with the same dignity and respect as the respondent. And it is up to the university judicial system to decide if there are sanctions and what those sanctions are. Sexting took off a lot during the pandemic as well. And we have a lot of students who believe that if they're not actually talking about a sex act, that they're not sexting. But if they're using any of these words in a text message or on social media, that's a part of sexting. Why is it important? Because of this map. States in red. Sexting is charged as child pornography if the person during the sexting generally is under 18. So those middle school students who are sharing pictures with each other could be charged in those states for child pornography. If you're sending young people to college of any of those states, they need to know that. The states in yellow, which include us, have a separate offense just for sexting. People going to college in those states need to understand that too, so that they can protect themselves. We provide support by sending students to resources on campus. Our counseling center, our victims advocate program, and our university ombudsman. Those are the people who can provide the level of support that they're looking for that my office can. We make the connections, they provide the support. It's up to all of us to do something to address the sexual violence. Remember, every 73 seconds. Bystander intervention, we have to find ways to get information to our students so that they're able to just look out for each other. When I was in college, my girlfriends and I went to a party, we all went together and we were all leaving together. We weren't leaving anybody behind. These girls are leaving their friends behind with men and they don't even know their last name. They meet them online and they come to me and it's, I was attacked by this guy in my room. How did he get to your room? I met him online, I gave him my address. What's his name? John. John what? I don't know. I can't go and question John, I don't know. So they've got to learn to look out for each other, to help each other. If you see somebody starting to get drunk, you kind of got to get them in an Uber or get them away from the people who are feeding the alcohol to them. This is what I do. I investigate claims of discrimination, I do training, and I try to make sure that our athletics programs are equitable. I try to make sure that our engineering program is looking out for women, making sure that they have opportunities to do research, making sure that they have opportunities to present at conferences, and trying to make sure that we get more males in our nursing program. So I'll now take any questions that you have. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think, like using the NCAA weight room inequality example, do you think that when those things happen, it's because there aren't enough women decision makers in the room?
Exactly.
That's how that was allowed
Exactly.
to unfold?
Yeah, because there's a separate committee that works to put together the men's tournament than there is to put together the women's tournament. And you're generally given a budget. And if you don't know what the other person's budget is, you may make some adjustments that you wouldn't make if you knew there was more money available. That's it. You had him too.
I just was curious, when you were talking about trying to have equality, like in the engineering program and the nursing program, is are the efforts done on campus, or is there any sort of recruiting that's done outside of campus in order to recruit, female students into engineering and that sort of thing?
It has to be both. One of the things that the university has to get better at is using our faculty members in our different academic departments and reaching out at the middle school and the high school level. We can't wait until they enroll at this university to try to convince them that they want to be an engineer. If they're gonna be an engineer, they need to, before, my daughter's in the 9th grade, they need to know in the 9th grade so that they're taking the requisite math classes and science classes that will get them academically prepared to compete when they get to college. And we've got to do a better job of working with the Jacksonville community. We had a position that they created after George Floyd, Chief Diversity Officer. That person left and went to work for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're now interviewing for another person, and they want that person to help work with the community. Our new Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management, I knew when he was at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, he does a lot of outreach, but he's only been here like a year and a half. So our numbers are going up. I do a report called the Florida Equity Report that all state universities have to do, where we show by gender and by ethnicity the number of incoming freshmen, the number of incoming transfers, and the number of degrees we award each year. And then it also looks at our faculty in terms of who's in instructor level positions and who are in tenure earning positions. And when I presented it, one of our trustees said that they wanted UNF to look a little more like the census data. Well, the census data shows that we have 12% Hispanics in this community, and we have 11% Hispanics on campus, which would seem that we're doing a good job. Except even though Hispanic students are our largest minority population, they're graduating at the lowest rate. So we've got to figure out what it is that gets them to come to UNF, but not graduate from UNF. On the other side, our Black students are graduating, but they're less than 10% when Jacksonville has a 30% Black population. So what is it that we're doing that's making them go to Central Florida, go to South Florida, go to UF, go to FAMU, go to Bethune-Cookman? Because more students, the data shows, since COVID are staying very close to home. And each of our colleges has more than 60% of their students from either Duval or St. Johns County. So why are they choosing to go elsewhere when they could stay here? We don't have that answer, but that's something that we have to find out. Yes, ma'am.
So one of the things that you mentioned was about the colleges are working to promote and educate what a healthy relationship looks like. And I know as an athlete, recruiting starts very young, sometimes in middle school, sometimes in high school. So are the colleges doing anything to work with those students that they're looking at recruiting, or working with the high schools or middle schools to start creating that education about a healthy relationship, so when they do come to college, they at least have some foundation? Because by the time they're 18, a lot of those behaviors just are not going to be changed.
Yeah. Unfortunately, right now the NCAA still has their recruiting calendars in place, and so there's very limited contact that coaches can have with students prior to their junior, senior year in high school, when they're able to get them on campus for official visits. Even when they go to watch them compete, there's very little contact that they can have. That's why they all wear the polo shirts with their mascot on it. So as the students are leaving the floor, they stand around the court. And so as the students are leaving, they get to see which schools are there watching them. And until those rules are changed, there's really not a lot that the recruiters could do. Then on the other hand, it wouldn't be economical for them because they're recruiting so widely in the 7th and 8th grade, and they really are only gonna spend the most amount of money on the people that they think are actually gonna come to their school. Unfortunately, we don't have enough money to be holistic and want to educate everybody in middle school. We want to educate those people in middle school that we think are gonna come to our campus early and often and then matriculate with us. So, but the colleges can work with the high schools in their local area to come up with some programs that they can do where the professors don't have those restrictions that the coaches have. Some of the administrators, like when I worked in compliance, there was a limit to what I could do because it could be seen as me trying to recruit. So what I did was just educational sessions for parents and guidance counselors. But there are other people who work with intramurals, who work with club sports, who can go into the schools without those NCAA restrictions and try and get that going.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
So if 60% of UNF students are from this general area and you wanna attract male students to the nursing program, how do you go about recruiting them?
We've got to get men interested in health careers, number one, and then letting them know that being a doctor is not the only viable option, that there are many other health careers that are available. And we have to get them to love math. I was allergic to math, still am. But we've got to get them in math and science classes at an early age. A lot of times, from my experience, so I had to look at the transcripts to see who could be certified and who could be admitted. And the girls' GPAs were generally a lot higher than the guys, because the guys are generally told, you need a C average to be able to play for me. So if a C is my goal, a C is what I'm gonna hit. Where the girls are taught, you may not be able to get a scholarship with this sport. You may need to get an academic scholarship. So your grades have got to be as high as they can be. So they're getting 3.6 and 3.7 and 4.5 and all of that because they're trying to be competitive for both an academic scholarship and an athletic scholarship. And we generally tell our boys the athletic scholarship is the only way out for you. We're not even trying to push them to be academic scholars. And so we've got to work with these students in understanding how important middle school is, not because those grades are gonna count, but those habits, those study habits that you develop, trying to tackle hard stuff and conquering it are gonna help you when you get to 9th grade and they do count. Yes, ma'am.
So say you get these women into the engineering programs, are there things that you are doing to prepare them for the future? I have friends who are engineers that are women that have quit their job. I mean, same as law, you know, women turnover rate is the highest. Are there things that you're doing to help them prepare for those issues in the workforce?
Those are things that's up to the individual college and the individual dean. Each dean decides how they want their college to look and how they want their college to operate. And then we just support them with their vision. Now, we do have an active Women in Engineering club at UNF. I did a focus group with them my first year. And a lot of them indicated just having a lot of general stereotype challenges in their courses. They'll be in a group of 5, and they'll be the only woman in the group. And the guys will look to them and say, well, you need to be the secretary and take down the notes of what we're talking about. They're like, I'm an engineer just like you are. Why are you asking me to be the secretary? But all of them aren't as vocal. So some of them will just go, okay, I guess I have to be the secretary because this guy asked me. we have a lot of just general self-esteem issues with our girls. As I said, if it's more important to you that you're invited to the Georgia-Florida tailgate and you don't go to Georgia or Florida, and your school doesn't even have a football team, and that's more important to you than making sure that a young man who is sexually assaulting women is held accountable, we gotta go all the way back to square one. And again, that connects with her question about getting the men in nursing, is getting the women to understand that they can be engineers. And the way they understand that is by having women who are teaching them engineering. By having women who are engineers come to the high school and talk about engineering as a career. My daughter's school does a great job with arts. They bring authors and professional actors and professional musicians into the school to talk to them about opportunities in the arts, in college and post-graduation. And most of our other high schools are not doing that with things like engineering or cybersecurity or computer science or even law. Thank you all. If you have any students who are interested in working in sports at all, please share my podcast.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. We want to thank you so much for speaking with us today. And on behalf of JWLA, we have a journal for you. And for your daughter, we'd like to give you, here's a little umbrella for you.
This is
Thank
beautiful.
you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
need one. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.